So I want to say a word of introduction about our guest preacher this morning, Reverend Janie Spahr. She comes to us from San Francisco, where she lives in retirement and where she dotes on her grandchildren. And I want to just introduce her because she is really one of the reasons why all of the successes that we have experienced in our liberation movement are coming to fruition at this time. You know, it didn't just happen overnight. And Cathedral of Hope didn't just happen overnight. Sometimes there are individuals who really, through personal sacrifice, made it possible for the changes that we see today. So I first met Janie in the early 80s. She was working at the Metropolitan Community Church in San Francisco, which had hired her because the Presbyterian Church said they had no room for a lesbian in ministry. And this was really true in the early MCC days. We had the best clergy from every denomination because they didn't know what to do with them, and we did. Janie made such a strong imprint pastorally on that congregation that you can go there now, 30 years later, and say her name, and there'll be an appreciative moment for how she loved when she was there and afterwards. She went on trial several times. This woman has been on trial more times than Joan of Arc in the Presbyterian Church for being a lesbian, for being hired as a pastor, as she was in Rochester, New York, at the Downtown Presbyterian Church, and they wouldn't let her take her job at the Presbyterian Church, even though the congregation hired her. So the congregation continued to pay her to go around the country and to be a lesbian evangelist. And she really touched a lot of lives and told her story in many places. Not just her story, our story. And then, as we always used to do in Metropolitan Community Church, we've been doing weddings for nearly 50 years, and we forgot to ask for permission. We just did it. And we never thought they'd be legal, but we never thought we'd go on trial for them either. And especially in the early part of this century, Janie was put on trial time and time again for the crime of performing marriages for Presbyterians. At one point, she was put on trial for performing 16 of these marriages. And the net effect was that now the Presbyterian Church voted to ordain gay people and also to permit its ministers to perform marriages. So, here's the real reason I wanted you to hear her. She was not only a brilliant strategist in making the church the inclusive church it's becoming, she was the heart of our revolution. And you'll hear it when you hear her preach. So, welcome.
Holy cow! You all are unbelievable. Hello there. Anybody Presbyterian out there? Oh, I just want to say what a joy it is to be here with you. And thank you so much to Jim, because when I kept hearing no, Jim would have me come to MCC San Francisco, and at least they would go, okay, let's do it again. And they kept sending me out, you see. So what happened is that they always thought it was the Presbyterians, but it was really people like Jim and MCC who made me their missionary to the mainline denominations. And with that, my first time, 10 years later, my first sermon was called A View from the Missionary Position. And you got humor, you're alive here. That's what I say. All right. I have gifts for you, which I will give to you at the end, it seems. But will you pray with me? Wonderful, loving God, we love your word and we love your people. We thank you for this day. We thank you for urging us and calling us out to dare to be who we are so that we can learn to love even more. Touch us now with the wonder of you and the wonder of us because of you and because of each other. We thank you for your word. Well, I wanted Jim to know that I actually wrote this sermon about 4 weeks ago, but you know what? There's somebody here at 5 o'clock this morning who said, it's not the thing you're going to preach. So I do want you to know that the Holy Spirit speaks even to Presbyterians. So I want to talk with you a little bit about what you have done to this old woman in these last many weeks preparing to meet with you. You had me go back to, I began to reflect from my childhood about what it means to be in church. I began to look at, I have a twin sister, Joni, and I remember when I came out, all her husband said, "Sure hope you're not." But the wonderful thing about Joni and me is we had this thing, you know, when you always have someone in the room with you and then someone with you, you always have a pal. And so growing up together was something, and going to church, we went to the church at the end of our street. And at the end of our street was this amazing time in which we saw our family, our parents, all involved in service. My father, I found out years later, didn't even want to be an elder. He didn't feel he was worthy. I mean, this amazing thing, I tell you, everybody that sat in front of us, the McCormicks and the Angers behind, who gave us Hershey bars. It was a wonderful place. So I thought being Presbyterian was to belong, to commit, to love the Jesus stories, to say that everyone was welcome. And so I believed that through my childhood, right? And then I thought, well, now I'm going into ministry. It wasn't enough, of course, that you're a woman, but I never heard that either, the no, you say. And the God's yes in the face of no. So I'd never seen a woman minister or anything like that, but I just knew from the age of 14, woohoo, I just knew, okay, I'm speaking it. From the age of 14 onward, that I was going to be a minister, you know, and the men that I dated and so on, they say, you're too fun to be a minister, but we won't talk about that part. But the thing that was so incredible is, as every one of us knows who have been in this situation, so there I was in ministry having this great time. I had all these youth groups. It was so fun. It was just like, and I had this wonderful husband and 2 little boys. And when you say to them, you can tell us all your secrets, and they do. And Jimmy kept leaving a book around the house called Loving Someone Gay by Don Clark. So when you have this happening, something happens inside of you. And I remember having met Bill Johnson and Ellen Barrett, and of course Troy Perry and people, and I said to Jimmy, oh my God, I know I'm a lesbian. And he said, I know. I've been waiting for you to tell me. It was in that moment, as we sat with our boys at the dinner table, that why I tell this story is because he said to the boys, Mom, tell the boys the wonderful thing you've learned about yourself today. And with that, my one older one, who was like 8, said, well, Mommy, you love people, and that's what matters. And the other one said, oh, this is so great. Let's go tell the church. And so their father said, I know we're really excited, but I don't think they'll be as excited as we are. And that's been the case for many years. But the tremendous thing, and that Jim talked about, is that I think what happens when it finally comes inside of you, that it's not, oh my God, but thank you, God. Do you remember that time when your sexuality and spirituality, and then the church doesn't want you? You're thinking, I'm finally healthy. What's the matter with you? Right? Is this true? Is this true? So the tremendous thing is this. So the downtown church, when they said no, When they said no, but the court system said no to me, they made me an evangelist. Now, what is an extrovert going to do about that? So the first time I flew into Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, this is where I'm from, and I flew into there, and this is what I heard, because this is so much about our history at MCC. This young seminarian was shaking when she picked me up, and she said, "Reverend Spahr, there's only been one bomb threat since you've come into town." I said, "Well, thanks for the welcome." But what happened from that day on, it said, lesbian minister comes home. And I'm telling you, every place we went, and we went 2 by 2 because I think Jesus told us to, we would go out across this country. But it was like when you finally know who you are, and it's like people would look at you and go, "Oh, poor dear." And I say, "Oh, no, poor dear, I have myself. And I have God." And there's something so incredible when you get the opportunity to travel this country and to just be yourself, you know, and it's so strange, you know, when people look painful for you because you love who God has made you. And I think this is the thing as I reflect throughout the years. I think being lesbian has saved my life. And I guess that's what some of the things I want to say to you. Because I was living a script, and we all have those scripts that culture, and they do these things to us that we keep living the script. And when you step out of the script, then you know that God really must love you and coax you into a new place. So with that, I began to do this. If in fact we aren't invited, then what are the power dynamics? And our questions then became, the healthier we have become, who isn't at the table and why? What are the power dynamics? Who frames the question and who gives the answer? What does this sexual orientation have anything to do with racism and classism? What does it have to do with gender identity? What does it have to do with hunger? Because this is the great thing that systems of power do. They isolate. And they say it's only about gay people. See, when I get phone calls like this, there's one friend of mine who became one of our evangelists, got a phone call that said this: "Reverend Spahr, you know, Don Stroud is not talking about just gay things. He's talking about hunger and race and class. He's talking about poverty and the disparity between the rich and the poor." And I said, "Yes?" Don Stroud said this: "I am no one's gay poster boy. I am a minister of the Church of Jesus Christ, and I will speak out about injustice anywhere and everywhere." Yes! So don't let government or church or anybody tell us. This is all connected, and this is what it's all about. And this is why you're doing work on immigration. Is that right, Jim? And this is why we're praying about racism, and this is why, because it's all connected. And systems of power want to disconnect us so we don't get it. Isn't it fabulous? When we become healthy, then we ask the right questions. Who isn't here? Why not? Or why? Isn't that fabulous? So when we travel the country, you and I know so many stories. So, you know, we're Presbyterian, so we like to tell at least one, sometimes 3. But today maybe 1. Okay. This happened in North Carolina. I was at a college, and this is what you set up whenever you want to make sure that everybody's point of view is this. Let's forget about justice. Do you hear what I'm saying to you? So watch this. So here was someone who didn't want to have gay people ordained. Here was someone in the middle who wasn't sure. You know, the moderates, the lukewarms that Jesus loved so much. And then here was little Janie, the advocate. You got this? So here's the thing. This man began to just say terrible things about LGBT people, just terrible. And then this woman got up and spoke. You know, it was like, where am I? The Middle Ages? I mean, you know what I'm saying, though, because we've heard it so much. And this is what happened. All of a sudden, I looked, and a young man was standing, and two people beside him, and these were his parents. And he said to the man, I want you to look at me. He said, I want you to remember me, and I'm going to tell you this. He said, when I was 16 years old, I sent my parents off on their vacation and told them I'd see them the next day. My sisters had also joined them, and it was about a 4-hour trip. He knew that they had gotten there, and he went into his father's gun closet, opened it up, and shot himself. He woke up in the ICU. On the way home, his mother and father said, he's popular. Everybody loved him. Why would he have done a thing like this? And Michael said, well, my mother leaned in this oxygen tent and said this, Michael, this is the only thing I can think of. She said, Michael, are you gay? And he said a tear came down his eye. And she said, oh, Michael, we can do this. We can do this together. It's all right. You're going to be okay. And he said to this man, and you sat beside me and told me what a good Christian boy I am. And you told me that I would be okay. And he said, sir, I am okay. And I am a gay Christian man, and you must stop talking this way because you are killing us. I'm not kidding. The audience went electric. A woman got up and said, you're talking about my granddaughter, and you can never talk that way again. Just all across the room, from from parents to grandparents, and so on. It was like, holy moly. There were moments like that where you just go, oh my God. And then there were moments when people were really asking the right questions. And it was always at college and universities when someone would always ask this. They would say, Janie, we don't care if you're gay, straight, whatever you are, but we want to know, can we ever have a healthy relationship in a fractured culture? That's what every church should be talking about. Can we ever have a healthy relationship in a fractured culture? And we don't care if you're gay, straight, whatever you are. How do we live this? How do we live this in this fracturedness and violence? Okay, this is what young people were asking. Oh my God, all across this country. And then you always felt kind of like, I always went with my friend Jenny Davidson, who was a shock white hair, heterosexual ally. She had been the former vice moderator of the church. So she would say all these wonderful feminist things, and then I would come next. They never expected her at 80 to talk about feminism, and then when I would come next, it didn't matter what I said. But it was those kind of moments, and so I want to tell you this last moment because I have such an amazing family. I have wonderful sons who love me into loving me. I have a wonderful former husband. He and his wife, Jackie, we just celebrated their 25th anniversary, and they were my advance team on all these trials. And they would go and call and say, there's a great place where we can stay. And so when the church does trials, what they forget is that it empowers us terribly. And it brought all those couples together. There were many more than 16. I don't know, maybe they didn't get the names right, But I always reported it because I wanted them to know it was a wonderful thing. Because remember, the early years, we didn't talk about marriage. We talked about holy unions, commitment ceremonies. Do you remember this? Celebrations, blessings. Remember, we did blessings. But the tremendous thing is that I got to do all these marriages of these friends of mine. Now, can you imagine if I'd have said to them, oh, listen, thanks, but my church doesn't let me? Well, healthy gay people don't like things like that. So of course I would say yes, and it was but the thing is, when you're on trial and you're in a disciplinary trial, you get to say anything you want. It is so amazing. If it's a remedial trial, then the system speaks. Do you see what I'm saying? But so I said to my 16 couple friends, we get to say about our marriages. We get to talk. We get to do all this. They're like, we do? Yeah. So hundreds of people came to hear the most incredible, witnessing, fun, wonderful people. People who would say things like, I can't believe I'm here. My family loves me. My neighbors love me. What? The church doesn't love me? What is this? I mean, it was wonderful things like that were said. It was so joyful. And all these people, you know, and so surely we thought at the last trial, surely we thought, well, we've won because these are the things we heard. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing all your deepest things about yourselves. Thank you for sharing that you didn't commit suicide as a young person. Thank you so much. And then they said, but she's guilty. Now, friends, I want you to know when I turned around, and this is what I wanted to tell you. The more conservative we are in our theology, the more work we do around who God is and how God loves us. Okay? So I turned around and I looked and I saw that Jeff and David, one of the couples, their shirts were wet with tears. And then there were other little rascals that said, I can't believe we let them do it to us again. But what happened after that, going through all the trial and all the couples still there, all the couples standing, the third time, these friends of mine said, I can't come to hear you rebuked. I'm just not going to go. I'm just not going to hear it. And other people said, well, I might come, but I just can't. I just can't because it's so wrong. And that's when Scott Clark, the attorney, he said, I'd like to move that we not rebuke Janie. For an hour and a half, people came forward and they said things like this. Janie, we love you, and we have always stood beside you and behind you, but we have never stood in front of you, and it's time we do it. Another person said, I'm in the recovery system. I'm in the recovery of folks. And she said, we're going to say a word that we say. We said, this is crazy what we're doing to gay people. This is crazy. And you know what? Janie Spahr, my former husband, after 20 years, he and his wife, Jackie, came back to the church. And Janie Spahr got up and he said, I am so tired of you abusing our family. I want you to stop it right now. With that, Jim Spahr is an elder in a moderate Presbyterian church. And when overtures come forward for marriage or for ordination, this is what Janie Spahr said. Oh, you don't have to pass these overtures. But if you don't, I will be such a pain in the ass that you really ought to do it now. And you know what? And you know what? He did. They did. They passed it. But what I want to say to you now, what I've learned throughout these years is really all about the struggle and the persistence, and to persist in love. Because there's something happens when people yell at you or call you all kinds of names, but when you go to them and say, "Who are you?" There's something that happens. And that's what you have been doing for years and years here. So I have something for you. I went into the Castro area. Has anyone heard of that? And I said, this is the last thing that they have there. I'm not kidding, the last one. And I said this, I'm going to Dallas, Texas, and they need something big. So, I said, here it is. So, this is what I want to say to you. God is a disco dancer, and she wants to dance with you. And you should know it was a wonderful dyke that put this screw in. The other thing, can I just kind of put this here? If it rolls off, man, are they going to be angry. Now, the other thing is, you have to know Jim. Do you love this? I hope, the great thing about Jim, he's an amazing feminist. Can I say that word out loud? And so he's working with you around shared leadership. He's working with you around all these incredible things that we're trying to do around race and class and gender. I know him. And I bet he's doing some groups too, isn't he? Huh? Bet you've got committees, don't you? That's a Presbyterian at heart. Don't let them fool you. So the thing is, I went into the Castro gym, and I just had to do this. I couldn't believe it in all my life. If any of you can see this, I couldn't believe it. It's a mermaid. It's got a 10-gallon hat, and by God, if he doesn't have a cross on his chest. So I said, well, my, let's give this to Jim. And the name of this man is called Dallas, believe it or not.
Thank you.
Is that hilarious?
Perfect.
Perfect. So bless your heart. Thank you so much.